Welcome to BPTV Cable. My name is Andy Amrine. I'm your host. This is our Handy Andy segments. Today we're going to be talking about refinishing furniture, wood staining. So we're going to talk about stripping, patching, sanding, staining, sealing, the whole gamut of it, the whole project of it. So it's a fun project. The project itself is maybe time consuming because there's a lot involved in stripping and preparing and everything. But when you're done with a woodworking project, it's amazing how glad you are, how proud you are of a piece of furniture. So you take an old piece of furniture, 100-year-old dresser or something, and it has 20 load coats of paint or something on there, and you're stripping it down, staining it, sealing it. When that project is done, yeah, it might take you a week or so to do it, depending on your time. But when you're done, you're really proud. That piece looks gorgeous. It looks fabulous, and you can't believe what it is that you did with that old piece of furniture. So let's start by talking about wood strippers. I brought safer kind of strippers, regular wood strippers. There's two real basic type of strippers. This is your citrus or your green type of strippers. These are your safer type of strippers. These are the type of strippers that they don't smell bad. A lot of people who have ever done any type of wood refinishing type work, they're always like, boy, I hate strippers because it stinks. A product like this smells citrusy. It's a very good stripper, and it doesn't burn your nostrils when you're doing the work. Where you go into a product like Save-A-Grand or Strippies or something, you go and you whiff a bunch of these, and this is one that you're burning your nose hairs with because of the smell. So this kind of a product, this is a product that you'd want to use outside. This is a type of product that you can use outside or inside with it. They both do a good job. You got to just let the product work. The biggest thing about strippers, no matter what brand of stripper you're using, is you got to allow the product time to work. Biggest mistake people make with any of the strippers, any of the brands of strippers, is they're going to be putting the product on and then they get impatient. They only wait like 10, 15 minutes, and after that short of a period of time, you're not allowing the product to actually work. So when using any of the strippers, you have a board, whether it's stain painted, you want to brush the stripper on and just in one direction. You don't want to go back and forth. You can use any type of a brush that you're going to use, but you want to just start at one end and brush the stripper on. You don't want to go back and forth because then you're disturbing the chemical that you just put on. So take your stripper and just brush it down and let it sit. And I'm going to say most of the brands, you're going to let them sit anywhere from half hour to an hour, 30 to 60 minutes. You want to let it sit long enough that you're seeing the actual product, the actual paint or stain that you're removing is bubbling and curling and so forth. But you don't want to let it sit to a point that it dries up, because once the product, the stripper, has dried up on the surface, it's useless again and you start all over again. But after you brush the chemical on, then you go into how you want to remove it. A lot of people like to just use a steel wool pad. You want to use something that's a really coarse steel wool. You could just take the steel wool pad and you just scrape it down on the surface itself. In time, that works well. You're not doing any damage to the wood surface, but the steel wool pad is going to clog a lot with the chemical and everything. And that's when you get into a paint scraper. In a scraper, it's not going to clog it all on you. You're just going to run it over the surface and all the goop and paint is going to get on top of the putty knife, but then just have a rag, a towel or something nearby and you just keep cleaning it off and scraping on some more. It's a little easier, little less messy to do this over the steel wool. The downside with it is if you're not careful, you could scratch and gouge the wood itself. So if you're using a putty knife, you want to try and get one that's flexible so it gives a little bit, don't get anything too stiff, and you want to make sure you're keeping it flat. Don't run it at any angles because then you're going to damage the wood surface itself with it. So, and don't hesitate to be doing this in 2 coats or 3 coats. It works better with any of the type of strippers that you use. It works better to put a little on, let it soak, scrape it, and then put a second coat on, allowing the time in between for the chemical to work and allowing the time in between for you to scrape it itself. Let the chemical do the work. But do it once, do a second coat, do a third coat until you get down to your bare surface area that you're able to stain again and bring to the wood back to life itself. Now, once you're done stripping and using your stripping chemicals, you want to be able to, what I will term, wash or clean the surface itself. There, you could use regular paint thinner. I like the low odor paint thinner. Once again, I don't want to burn up my nose hairs on it. Or they actually make a wash, a paint stripper wash, which is more of a glycol base type of a chemical over paint thinner. Both are going to work, and all you're doing is you're just cleaning the surface. So you're just taking a rag, you're soaking the rag with the wash, and then you're just wiping the surface of the wood itself. And what that is going to do is it's going to remove any chemical that is left from the paint strippers on the board itself. Because if you don't get all those chemicals off of that board, then what's happened when you try and put a stain on it or a urethane on it, that chemical, that stripper is still on there, and it'll prevent the new product from bonding to the surface. So you want to make sure that it's good and clean. The paint thinner over a paint wash, a stripper wash, the big difference between the two is you got to watch the amount of paint thinner you're putting on the board, because you'll raise the grain of the wood. And if you do that, then it's just going to take a lot more sanding to get the board back down into a glass smooth type of surface. So say you've done your stripping, you've done your wash and so forth, then you get into patching the board itself. Say that you have some nooks, you have some little gouges, you have some nail holes and so forth. This is when you want to be doing some patching work. These are two of my I'd say my favorite brands on your wood patching. Another one is this Minwax. Minwax comes with a pre-done stain putty. So if you actually know what color of stain you're going to use, you could use the Minwax one, and that stain putty already has the color to it, so it just blends better. Or with these, if you're trying to get to a special color, you could actually pull some of the putty out of the container into just on another board or in a little cup or a dish or something, and mix some of your color stain with it and blend it. That'll change the color of the putty to the color of your stain you're doing. Then once again, it's just going to make your finished job look a lot better, because the patchwork, the putty, isn't going to jump out on you. It's going to blend in a lot better once you get the whole board stained. So now you have that done, you're into a staining process of the board itself. Now, I'm a fan of these sanding sponges. Sanding sponges are a lot nicer than just using a regular piece of paper. If you're just doing something really small and you don't need a lot of surface area, a piece of sandpaper is going to be fine. And yeah, a piece of sandpaper is only 25, 30 cents, where sanding sponge is going to cost you a couple dollars. But in using the sanding sponge, a sanding sponge really allows you to sand an entire surface area very quickly. And if you end up getting a sanding sponge full of the wood particles and the sawdust, just like any sponge, these are washable. You can have a little bucket of water nearby. You can rinse the sponge out. Make sure it doesn't have any sopping water, because you don't want to put heavy water on any wood. But you can rinse this off, let it dry, and you could reuse it. And a lot of the sanding sponges have different angles to it, different cuts, different size. They fit into your hand a lot better. But it makes for a nice sanding surface, and it really allows you to sand the wood grains down, get a board nice and smooth, and you're not ripping up your hand, your nails, and so forth with it. So you've getting everything down to a nice smooth surface. The next step is you want to have the board free and clear of dust. They make a product called a tack cloth. A tack cloth is nothing more than a sticky rag. It's a very sticky rag. And what you want to do before you go into any type of staining, you want to make sure that your wood is perfectly clean. After you're done sanding it, you don't want all that sawdust sitting on the board itself. You want to make sure that the board is clean, so when you stain it, it's going to take the stain, and you're not going to have all those dust particles on there that you stained over top and can't get off again. So have yourself a couple. They're like 79 cents or $1, but it's a very sticky rag, and you could keep reusing them, and you just wipe the whole board down, and it cleans the board minutes before you would go ahead and stain. Now when you get to the next step, the staining, one step you may or may not need. If you have a lot of times on a board, you're going to have a lot of different wood grains, and on a board itself it might be uneven, especially after staining or after sanding and stripping. They make a product called a sanding sealer. A sanding sealer is a clear coat that you can brush over top of the board, and it seals the porousness of the wood so stain goes on very evenly. On a piece of pine like this, it's not really going to be necessary, but you get into some oak, some walnut, some of the finer, heavier grain wood, a sanding sealer is a nice trick to seal all the wood grain, so when you put a coat of stain on top of it, there's not any blotchy surfaces, there's no light spots, dark spots, and so forth. It blends everything in very, very well. If you use it, you just have to let it, you have to let the sanding sealer dry before you start into any other, the next step, which is sanding. Now in sanding or sealing, staining and urethane and so forth, a lot of people like to wear gloves. They don't want to get the stain and everything all over their hands. These are heavier type of gloves. These gloves you can use for stripping or for staining, or if you're not into something real heavy, they even just make these little, they're, I don't know, 25, 30 cents or something for a glove on it. You could cover your hand so you're not getting it totally coated in your wood stain or sealants, and you get stain on your skin. It'll come off, but it's going to take a week or so before it wears off. It's not something that very easily just wears out. Now we got this whole board done. We're done with all the prep work. We're ready to do some staining itself. You can get into brushes, you can get into foam brushes, you can get into better brushes. Believe it or not, I like to just use a regular rag. You want to use a nice rag, something that doesn't have a lot of lint to it, but in using a rag, I find you get a lot more even coat of the stain on the wood itself. So you're just dipping the rag into it, and you're just running the stain down over top of the board itself. You're not worrying about any brush strokes, any of those kind of problems with it. And you could see from a rag, I get a very, very even application of the stain because the rag has absorbed that stain very well. And I'm not one that wants to rub back and forth on staining and on finishing. You want to just go with the grain, and you want to just wipe it in one direction. You don't want to go back and forth and back and forth. And you could see that this board has taken the stain really well, and you could even see that the wood grain, how the wood grain pops out on a stained side to compare to an unfinished board itself. It looks beautiful. It looks really pretty, and it does a nice job on it. Now with the staining, if you're happy with the finish, the color on it, you could stop there. If you want to go something a little darker, you're going to wait about an hour. Stain doesn't take a whole long time to dry. You can wait an hour, and you could put a second coat of stain on, or you could put a third coat of stain on, however dark it you want here. I have a board here that we finished. This is a straight stained. This is just a pure polyurethane on one side. So you can see how shiny the polyurethane is compared to just the stain itself. Or if you look down the center stripe here, this is the stain underneath with the polyurethane on top. So stain with the varnish, or just a straight varnish on it. You can get whatever appearance you want with it. But even holding these up next to each other, this is a polyurethane, just a clear coat on here. Here's that wood prior to putting the urethane on it. You could see that it really pops out. It looks a lot nicer, and it's very, very heavily protected. And same thing with one coat of stain compared to 3 coats of stain. You could see how much darker the wood can get depending on how much of a stain and so forth. Here, holding up next to each other, how much darker and so forth a board can get by just adding coat after coat of the stain itself. Now, the one thing to think of when you're doing the staining is you really want to be careful to pick the right colors. I mean, stains itself, there is hundreds of different finishes, different colors and stains, from the special walnuts to the fruit woods to the Salem maples to the mahoganies to the teak colors and so forth. There's lots of colors that you can get for wood stains. Also some other colors. This is just a different brand and so forth with it. But between Czar, between Minwax, between Carver Trip, Woodsman, there's so many brands of stains out there. And there's really, I don't have a huge difference or brand special. I go on stains. Everything to me is the color. You pick a color and everything else is going to fall right into place with it. From there, now a finish, you can get a lot of different opinions on the finish. The type of finish. What we're mainly working with here is different urethanes. The one here, this is a Helmsman. These are both Minwax. This is an exterior spar varnish, where this is an interior faster drying polyurethane. So indoors, you really don't need the spar, the Helmsman, unless you're doing like an exterior door, a door that faces the outside, or I like to use this on window trims also, because window trims will get the weather, they'll get the moisture change, they'll get the temperature changes, and you need something along that line. Also, a product that's been out for over 100 years is a product called Waterlox. Waterlox is more of a tung oil base. Very, very nice finish, very durable type finish. Once again, you'd want to be doing a couple coats. You can do wood floors with it. You can do anything with it. Anytime I'm doing a clear coat finish, I just put multiple coats on it. The more you put on it, the more durable it is. So if it's a floor, a window seal, a door, a tabletop, you want to put about 4, maybe even 5 coats of a urethane on or a Waterlox on. If this is just a nightstand, something that isn't as heavily used, doesn't get the weather, the moisture, a glass sitting on it, 2 coats, maybe 3 coats is all you're going to need with the urethane. But don't chintz at the very end of a project just because you don't feel like putting another coat on it. But a couple things you do prior to putting your urethane on. Now this stain, it's still not 100% dry, but in between the stain coats and the varnish coats on it, you want to buff it down with steel wool. You can use any of the synthetic type of steel wool, or if you're using your regular pad steel wool, once again, you want to use a very, very fine steel wool, like a 4/0 steel wool, where when we were doing our stripping work, we were using like a number 3, a very coarse steel wool. And what the steel wool is going to do, even though you used your tack cloth and got all those dust particles off of it, just from a piece of furniture that you've stained sitting, air pollutants, dust particles, air pockets, and everything are going to fall onto that board. So once the stain is 100% dry, whether synthetic or regular steel wool, and you want to just take it and rub down the board all over again, just lightly, just to make sure you're smoothing everything back out again. Once you've done that, go over it with your tack cloth again, and once again, that'll clean everything up. And then from there, you're ready to put your clear coat, your urethane on it. Now on your urethane, you cannot use a rag. You have to use a brush. A better brush is more preferred than a inexpensive type of brush. For our demonstration purposes here, I'm going to just go with one I'm going to throw away at the end of the day. I'm not a big fan of the foam brushes. When you use the foam brush on urethanes, what it does is as you're pushing on the foam, you're leaving air pockets, and air pockets are very, very bad when you're doing a urethane. So a pure bristle brush and putting your urethane on. And with urethanes, just like I said with stain, you really want to just do a 1 coat or 1 brush stroke from down through the surface and then grab more product. This is not something that you don't want to go back and forth. When you go back and forth, what it's going to leave a bunch of sticky marks on the board that are going to be very, very hard to get off again. So, you're just running down, and whether this is a surface area or a desktop or table legs or something, you want to try and just run the brush through with the grain of the wood. You never want to go opposite the grain of the wood because it's going to drag the brush, and once again, it'll leave pockets and air pockets and so forth with it. But that section is done. Everything is there. It's going to dry, and after it dries, now a urethane or a stain, I was saying you really only need about an hour of drying time. When you're into a urethane, it's a 24-hour dry. After this is dried 24 hours, you take your steel wool, your 4/0 steel wool, lightly buff it down. Once again, that'll take out the air pockets and any dust particles on it. Clean it with the tack cloth again, then go ahead and apply your second coat. Wait 24 hours, do a third coat, a fourth coat, or whatever you would need to get it into a super hard finish. Flooring, that's the most critical one. Tabletop, very critical. You can't just put 2 coats on because the urethane then will crack and peel and pop right back off again. So now you're at a point that this project, the last coat of your urethane is done. It's going to look gorgeous. It's going to look just absolutely outstanding. And you're going to have all that pride in doing the product and doing the project. People are going to say, wow, do you have that professionally done? You're the professional. You can do this. This is not a hard product, a hard project. Last 2 things I want to say, and before we close, if you have a wood project that is not this bad to where you have to go through all this process of stripping and sanding and sealing and so forth. There's a couple products on the market. One's called a Restore Finish. Restore Finish, if you have a wood table, a stain type of product that is showing a lot of watermarks, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of discoloration, this is a product that could work for you. That comes in I think 3 different flavors. There's a light oak, there's an oak, there's a walnut type of finish. So pick one that is close to your color, and all you're doing, you're using a rag, and you're just putting the product on with the rag, and then you're just wiping the surface area. And what this does is, like the name says, it actually restores that wood furniture to its natural lusters on it. Works very well. It chemically enhances pulling the stains out of the urethane, out of the stains. Does a super job. If it's a piece of furniture that's not destroyed and you want to just touch it up, general wear and tear, general maintenance on kitchen cabinets, chairs, tables. I'm not a fan of Murphy oil soap. I'm not a fan of Endust and Pledge and all those kind of oily, greasy type of products. They actually take the moisture out of the wood and damage it. A product called Millsac, absolutely amazing daily, weekly, monthly type of a wood care product. This is something that even if a piece of furniture is really dried out, but you like the color, you like the finish, you want to just try and restore the luster to that piece of furniture, a product like Millsac is a product for you. You're just putting it on a clean rag, spritzing it on a rag, and then just wiping the furniture itself. You're going to really enhance and bring the finish back to the furniture. So these are products for projects that aren't as extensive as this, but wood care, it's a great wintertime project, it's a great summertime project, but indoor, cooped up in the winter, using the right products, you're not worrying about the smells. It's a great, great, great way to restore some of your furniture at home or buying antiques and redoing it. So hope you enjoyed our segment today. I have fun showing you and teaching you about our products. Thank you for watching BPTV, and thank you for watching Handy Andy. See you again soon.